Thank you everyone for joining us again. This is another
Sorry.
one of the
You
video
do that.
series.
I'm so
There's
sorry.
no,
I
no, there's
made a
no.
noise with my water.
Oh,
Sorry.
please make as much noise as you want. There's no apologies here. But thank you everybody for joining us again. This is another episode in my continuing video series on telecom regulatory issues. Today, I've invited Diana James from the CommLaw Group to discuss, I guess we're going to discuss AI and communications. So really some of the recent developments with in the regulatory landscape of AI, especially how they apply to telecommunications service providers in the US, and just generally what's going on both at the federal level, I guess the FCC, maybe even FTC, and then at the state level. So have a fun conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Chris. And
Sure.
hi, everyone. I'm Diana James, a senior associate with the CommLaw Group. And I've been advising clients on regulatory compliance, including data privacy compliance when implementing AI solutions in communications. So happy to be here. Happy to have this conversation.
So I'm going to check my cheat sheet right now, but Diana, why don't you just give a little background on what the state of, I guess, regulation is as far as AI goes. I know that the FCC has several pending either rulemakings or regulatory actions related to AI. I know, on the federal level, there's no widespread AI regulatory framework. I know they're trying,
Mhm.
but generally each agency is kind of tasked with regulating its own, use of AI or within its sphere of influence. So I guess to start, what are some of the big things that the FCC that the FCC is doing to regulate AI?
Absolutely. So, one of the big ones has been that in 2024, the FCC issued a declaratory ruling saying that calls made with AI generated voice qualify as artificial or pre recorded voice under the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. And that means that calls made using AI generated voice are regulated as artificial or pre recorded voice calls,
Hmm.
meaning that such calls made for marketing purposes need to have the called party's prior written express consent to be lawful. And this is relevant to a lot of businesses that are making outbound AI generated voice calls for client outreach, for reaching
Yeah.
leads and potential clients. And this has been very important. The FCC also has several pending rulemakings that have to do with AI. For example, there has been a notice of proposed rulemaking in July 2024 that is seeking
Hmm.
comment on any additional AI specific disclosures and safeguards that businesses need to have in place. For example, a mandatory AI disclosure language if you're
Hmm.
using AI generated voice and calling your clients, or using
Yeah.
that for calls, potentially not even for outbound calls only.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
we haven't seen any conclusion on that rulemaking yet, so it's still probably pending. But AI disclosure language is still relevant under other applicable laws, for example, under consumer protection laws or AI specific laws in several jurisdictions, such as in the state of Utah, where in
Hmm.
certain regulated industries, there should be a disclosure that AI is being used when AI is communicating with consumers.
Hmm.
And if a consumer is asking whether they're talking to an AI system or AI bot, the AI bot needs to truthfully respond yes, if
Hmm.
that's an AI bot. If it's a person, obviously, they need to also truthfully say that it's a live person.
Yeah.
But back to the FCC, there is also another notice of proposed rulemaking on numbering and robocall infrastructure
Hmm.
that is also relevant to AI-enabled robocalls, for
Hmm.
example. So there has been an NPRM to tighten numbering policies to combat AI-assisted fraud,
Hmm.
fraud calls. So At the federal level, overall, there's also a push for federal preemption of AI regulation.
Yeah.
And this has been a heavily politicized issue too. And there has been an executive order in December 2025 that charges federal agencies and other bodies with figuring out which
Yeah.
state laws may be potentially holding back innovation in regulating AI. And there's a push to prevent overregulation
Yeah.
at the state level, but we haven't seen any specific steps on that yet at Congress. In Congress, but there have been several bills. For example,
Mhm.
there's a bill to preempt state privacy laws. So,
Right.
and that is getting a lot of pushback from the
Interesting.
states.
Hmm.
So,
So we'll go back to the robocalling in a second, but on the state level, so are states actually regulating AI right now? Like if I'm operating in, say, California, or I think you said Utah, are there actual regulations on what AI I can and can't use when I'm making a phone call or setting up a network?
I would say yes, but a lot of the relevant laws are technology agnostic,
Mm.
but they will apply to a lot of the AI use cases. For example, if businesses are collecting and processing personal data privacy laws will
Mhm.
apply. And there are also laws around call recordings,
Mm.
whether and how, so whether recording calls is legal and how to make them legal.
Mhm.
For example, there are requirements in 11 states that every party to the conversation needs to have given consent to the
Yeah.
call being recorded. And in a lot of cases, consent can be implied.
Mm.
For example, if there has been an announcement that the call will be recorded or may be recorded,
Mhm.
and they continue with the call, a lot of states treat it as implied consent. And basically, the laws that regulate this are wiretap laws
Mhm.
that protect people from surreptitious surveillance of their communications.
Yeah.
And there's this idea that once parties to the conversation know that they're being recorded or that their communication is intercepted, they are already informed, and they can make a choice as to whether to
Yeah.
proceed with the conversation or not. And those laws don't generally grant parties to the conversation the right to
Mhm.
not be recorded. They just have to know that this is happening. And another thing that I really wanted to mention in this regard is that whenever companies are using AI assisted communications, for example, whenever a conversation is automatically analyzed with AI in real time, for example, to create action items or maybe do some sentiment analysis,
Mhm.
in those cases, it is highly likely under the existing case law that a
Yeah.
lot of the wiretap laws will treat it as interception, even if
Mm.
there is no traditional recording of the call,
Mhm.
and even if it's not stored, even if this analysis is very
Yeah.
transient, the wiretap laws are still relevant. But basically saying that the call may be recorded, and
Mhm.
there are also other requirements that I
Oh, yeah.
wanted to talk about. Will likely, in most cases, obviously talk to a
Yeah.
lawyer to get actual legal
Got one right
advice.
here.
Yeah. But in most cases, that would help you comply and be in
Nice.
compliance.
Nice.
But yeah, would you like to hear another idea about using AI agents and complying with wiretap laws?
Of course. Of course I would. Let's do it.
Yeah. So a lot of so sorry. Although this is a new, they're very new novel area,
Yeah.
and this hasn't been heavily tested in courts yet, there is a strong indication that at least under some of the wiretap laws in the states, for example in California,
Mhm.
whenever you are using a third party AI vendor for call analytics, that third party may need to be disclosed
Oh,
because
wow.
there's an idea that if that third party can use this call recording for any purposes other than
Mm,
purposes of the party that is using this vendor, for example, for call recording, for call analytics. So if that third party can use the call recording for their own purposes, for example, to train their systems, they may be treated by courts as a third party to this conversation, not
oh, that's
just the recording device. So
yeah.
they need to be disclosed in order for there not to be any surreptitious eavesdropping by that third party. Yeah, and any
So
kind of
practically speaking, does that mean that anybody using an AI assisted recorder, I mean, we had already, whenever you get on a Zoom call, obviously the little icon pops up or the notification that, your note taker, but is that legally mandated under these laws then?
not this is not black letter law by any
Ah,
means
okay.
yet, but
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Mm-hmm.
from the case law that we have seen
Yeah.
under the California Invasion of Privacy Act, for example, it is likely that AI vendors need to be disclosed as a third party to this
Interesting.
conversation.
Interesting.
Uh,
Interesting.
so, yes, that's
Ah,
good to keep in mind.
no, absolutely. Absolutely. So going back to kind of the robocalls and just the FCC generally, if I'm a communications service provider and I'm operating a network in the US, what are some of the steps I can do to, manifest compliance or just be more mindful of the fact that, there are compliance obligations or there are increasing compliance obligations applicable to, obviously you said AI robocalls or the use of AI over networks. I guess what compliance obligations are there? And then, do I need to stop AI from going over my network? Do I need to, you know, enact anything to ensure that, the use of AI doesn't violate any laws or regulations?
So, I wouldn't say that you shouldn't be using AI by any means because we all know that it can be very powerful and
Yeah.
really help businesses streamline operations, and there's a lot of value in
Hmm.
using AI in communications, right? I would recommend having well, first of all, mapping all the use cases that are taking place
Hmm.
to understand which laws may apply and with what a particular business needs to comply.
Right.
For example, you could map use cases like call analytics, producing sentiment analysis, or maybe
Hmm.
recognizing the speaker using their voice print. And each of those use cases will have some kind of legal obligations
Right. Right.
attached to them. What else? It is also very important, and this is not
Hmm.
directly relevant to AI, but among other telecommunications providers' obligations, it is important to know your customer and know their yes, and know their use case, their business use case for
Yeah.
your telecommunications services or your
Mhm.
platform. And there are already robocall mitigation rules in place at the FCC, and a part of those rules are the requirements for knowing your customer. But
Mhm.
currently, they haven't been mandated in a specific form yet.
Mhm.
We have seen some indicators of what the FCC wants to see as part of the KYC process. For example, the kind of information that
Mhm.
communications providers need to collect from their customers or also verify from time to time. So
Right.
it's not just an onboarding exercise. But now we have a pending rulemaking at the FCC on KYC requirements where the FCC sought comment on which kinds of information providers need to collect, and how often they need to verify it and some other requirements. And our firm filed comments for a
Oh, wow.
coalition of small providers.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah.
What was that petition about?
Well, it was about it was calling on to the FCC to not set such strict requirements for the
Mhm.
KYC process. And
Mhm.
we asked the FCC to also take into consideration the types of customers that the communications providers are serving. For example,
Mhm.
some will only serve a lot of individual customers
Right.
that are unlikely to use their services to make illegal robocalls, or
Mhm.
those providers may not even have the technical ability to offer to make those illegal
Yeah.
robocalls on the large scale. Whereas other providers may be serving a smaller number of customers who are enterprise customers, and they may be using
Yeah.
some capabilities that'll enable them to make those robocalls on a large scale. And sometimes that may be where some of the
Mhm.
robocalls come from.
So when you say know your customer,
Mhm.
what does that mean? Do I need to take them out to dinner? Do I need to buy them a drink? Like what I know the FCC is kind of further defining it, but just experience wise, what kind of information do I need to know about my customers here?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I understand that it may sound kind of general and abstract without more specific information. But the FCC wants providers to know, obviously, the name of the customer, where they're physically located. They want, well, I'm talking in terms of not mandated rules yet,
Right.
but
Right.
what we've seen
But just generally
enforcement
from yeah, what
and
if I'm a
for
carrier, what do I gotta ask my customers, you know?
yes, yes. So i- it is recommended that you check their tax ID, you verify from their website and some due diligence search that they're actually who they say they are, that they have a legitimate business use case
Mhm.
for making calls using your systems, that they have an email on a
Yeah.
legitimate domain, not a personal email like on Gmail or
Come on,
something.
come on, my Gmail.
Yeah, like
Or
an
Yahoo.
email address from middle school or
Yeah,
something.
exactly. You never know.
But those are some of the
Yeah.
items the FCC wants you to
Okay.
know about your customer, and it also prefers that you verify that information from time to time to
Mhm.
see if it's still legit.
Mhm.
If you see any red flags that could be showing that this business is not a
Yeah.
legitimate business and they are just using your services to make illegal robocalls, that's also
Mhm.
something that you need to have in mind and act upon.
Yeah.
There are also requirements for taking reasonable steps to mitigate illegal robocalls, which
Mhm.
may involve, in some situations, analyzing the traffic with the use of AI, for example.
Mhm.
And sometimes providers will not have control over the network infrastructure. And in that case, they may rely on their upstream provider for that.
Mhm.
And they need to cooperate with their upstream provider to see if there are any signs of
Mhm.
potentially illegal traffic. For example, there are too many calls made in a given period of time, or
Mhm.
there too many calls are very short duration.
Okay.
There are also a lot of other technical signs that this may be illegal traffic.
Mhm.
So organizations need to take those reasonable steps to mitigate illegal robocalls.
Gotcha. What if my customer's overseas? Does that matter? Like, what if I'm processing calls from Nigeria or the Philippines or something like that? Is that something? Is that prohibited by the FCC? Can I still do that? Is that something that raises red flags?
There is definitely more scrutiny
Mm-hmm.
when a provider deals with the traffic coming from the overseas.
Mm-hmm.
And such providers will likely need to register in the robocall mitigation database as gateway providers. And just a general information piece, all the voice service providers and intermediate providers need to register in the robocall mitigation database and
Mm-hmm.
have a robocall mitigation plan on file. And I'm happy to talk more about that later. But returning to your original question, there is a rulemaking currently at the FCC on numbering policies, and the FCC has raised some questions about whether to allow non-US users to use the numbering resources, so the North American numbering
Mm-hmm.
resources. So this hasn't been settled yet, but
Mm-hmm.
there is definitely a trend where the FCC is treating foreign traffic with more scrutiny, maybe
Mm-hmm.
doesn't trust it as much because there have been indicators that sometimes illegal robocalls come from abroad,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
fraud
Yeah.
calls do, but they also come from inside the country. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No, absolutely. 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 So just going back to AI, is there a requirement here with Know Your Customer to kind of ask them about using AI? Do you have to check on that? Or do you have to do anything special if, say, your customer is using AI for robocalling?
Mhm. I I would say that it's a part of the KYC
Mm,
procedures within the robocall mitigation rules,
yeah.
but it's also good to know which capabilities your platform is offering, or
Hmm.
sometimes platforms will allow third-party AI vendors to offer services together to enhance the communication service provided by the platform. And it's important to know which compliance requirement may be triggered by that. For example, with data privacy laws, sometimes third party vendors will offer some capability that uses voice prints, and
Mm,
an integrated platform, communications platform, may need to be organized in a way that allows for all the required types of
mhm.
consent to be collected from users. For example, in general, uh,
Yeah.
under data privacy laws in the US, a notice will be sufficient. Under a lot of the state comprehensive data privacy laws, a notice of
Mhm.
collection and use of personal data will be enough. However, some types of information, some types of personal information are treated by states as sensitive information.
Mhm.
And not only states, actually, under the same goes for federal industry specific privacy laws. So, for example, medical data or financial data, as well as social security numbers, government ID numbers, and children's
Mhm.
data are often treated as sensitive data, or data that is awarded a higher level of
Yeah.
protection. So, to collect and use that kind of data, the data controller will need to have the data subject's consent.
Mhm.
So, not just a notice, but consent. And platform providers that allow for personal data collection and processing will need to take into account that sometimes, or oftentimes, using their communication platforms will share personal data, and personal data will be captured if it's not automatically deleted
Mhm.
right away, for example, for reduction or data minimization purposes. And here is where we could help. We could help figure out how to build a product so that
Mhm.
the business is compliant, has all the receipts that are required,
Mhm.
and can just proceed and not worry about retrofitting compliance later or having to
Right.
respond to an enforcement action or a class action lawsuit or something. So it may be a little painful at the very beginning to have to think about this, but it's so worth it down the
Yeah.
line because
Yeah.
you'll just use your technology, take advantage of it, and won't have
Totally.
to worry about compliance anymore.
We'll just let the AI do it all.
Yeah. Well, it
You
can
know,
be helpful.
no, that's good. That's good. That's amazing. Amazing. So just to close this out, both at let's say at the FCC level, where do you think regulation of AI is going? Do you think there's going to be more rules in the next 2 years on AI? Do you think there's going to be more of this free market kind of let's just have AI do everything approach?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. That's a fun question. Obviously, I'm not an oracle, but it does seem like that there is a trend towards deregulation of AI at the federal level. But as for the specifics, it also feels that a lot of the regulation that is technology agnostic but relevant to AI still may potentially fall outside of this federal deregulation trend. So I'm not sure how much actual deregulation we will see.
Yeah.
There's also a trend. Sorry, robocall mitigation, for example, seems to
Hmm.
be a bipartisan issue,
Hmm.
and
Nobody
the
likes
FCC,
robocalls.
nobody likes robocalls, and the FCC has been very active in its rulemakings on
Yeah.
robocall mitigation, and I don't know if we will see deregulation in that area. So AI assisted robocalls may still be further regulated, given how many
Mm,
making proceedings are currently pending on this. So I'm very curious to see where this will take us. And in the
yeah.
meantime, yes, I feel like we're operating in a very exciting area because every day there is something new happening and we always need to stay on top of things.
AI
We
is here
never
to
get
stay.
bored.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Well, Diana, thank you so much for joining and talking about AI and communications. I learned a lot from this, and I'm sure we're going to do this again soon because I have a lot more questions, and I think there's a lot more fun topics to discuss. We didn't even get into
Absolutely.
space.
Oh no. Yeah.
So maybe we'll go to space next time. We'll change the background
Sounds
and
great. Thank you so
talk
much,
all
Chris.
about
It's been a
that.
pleasure.
Absolutely. And everybody listening, if you have any questions, obviously there's comments, or you can reach out to Diana and I through LinkedIn or through the firm's respective contact areas. Do subscribe. Also subscribe to our firm's mailing list as well to get updated information on a lot of really cutting edge communications related issues. And just wanted to say thanks for everybody and appreciate it. All right. Bye.
Thank you for joining us.